Hello, folks, and welcome back to the Shack. This is Joe, N2DI, coming to you today with a quick tutorial on operating the Yaesu FT-891 split. I had a new ham ask me if I could explain what operating split actually is, why you'd want to do it in the first place, and how do you do it on the Yaesu FT-891. So I figured I'd put together a quick little video and add to my growing library of FT-891 videos. Operating split is a skill that every ham should have, especially if you want to chase DX. So if you want to learn what it's all about and how to do it on the Yaesu FT-891, then let's get started. So what is operating split anyway? The concept of operating split is pretty simple to understand. What it means is you're transmitting on a different frequency than you're receiving on. For a new ham, that seems a bit mind-bending for two reasons. First, because why would you ever do that in the first place? The person on the other end who is on your frequency wouldn't hear you transmitting. And the second is, how is that even possible with your transceiver? Because you turn the VFO knob to a frequency, and you're going to be transmitting and receiving on that same frequency. Let's tackle the first question. Why would you ever want to operate split anyway? And how would it even work? Well, for it to work, the person on the other end would have to operate split too. You just need to receive on the frequency where they're transmitting and transmit on the frequency where they're receiving. That seems like a lot of unnecessary work, right? So why would you do it in the first place? Well, DX stations, especially rare ones, often get tremendous pileups. One tactic that they employ to make it possible to work through these pileups is to operate split. What that means is they will be transmitting on one frequency, which hopefully you've tuned to hear this rare DX station, but they'll be receiving over a wider swath of the spectrum somewhere else. You'll usually hear them calling CQ, whether it's sideband or CW, and they'll add the word up and some number. If it's CW, it might be like up 1, and if it's sideband, it might be up 5. So you'll hear something like this on sideband. CQ, CQ, this is some rare DX station call sign, I don't know, Bouvet Island or something, up 5. So what that means is they're calling CQ on the frequency that you're listening on, but they're going to be listening on some random frequency at least 5 kilohertz up from the frequency you're currently tuned to. Now, how that works is you as the person chasing the DX will continue to listen on that current frequency, but you'll transmit on some random frequency at least 5 kilohertz up from the current frequency. Now, everybody else in the pileup will be doing the same thing, except they're picking some different random frequency to transmit on. This will spread the pileup over a wider swath of the spectrum to make it easier for the DX station to pick out someone to work. On their end, they'll be turning their VFO knob across maybe something like a 10 or 15 kilohertz chunk of the spectrum. That is, if they're using SSB. It'll be less if it's CW because, CW frequencies are much narrower. So as they tune across this 10 or 15 kilohertz wide piece of the spectrum, they'll be picking out random stations that they can hear and working them. This would make more sense with some high-tech graphics. So let's cut that in now. Okay, so here's the example we're going to use. Let's say the DX station is on 20 meters on 14.300. So they're transmitting in this block right here. Now they're saying up 5. So 5 kilohertz up from here is where they're going to begin to listen. So 5 kilohertz up will be 14.305. So what they're doing is calling CQ, and then they're turning their VFO knob across this chunk here. So maybe from 14.305 to 14.320. And they're just tuning up and down in here, and they're trying to find the station to work. Now you are going to be receiving on 14.300. You're going to put your radio into split mode, and you're going to pick some frequency up here somewhere. So in this example, we're picking 14.308. So you just set up right here, and you call the DX station. Now, hopefully, as they come tuning by, they'll hear you, pick you up, and work you, and then move on to the next station. So that's how it kind of works. Okay, so now that we understand the concept of operating split, how do you actually do it? Well, you're going to need a couple of buttons on your rig. You're going to need this A/B button, and you're going to need split, which is labeled SPL. You can find split in the function 1 shallow menu. I've assigned it to button C over here. If you don't know how to do that, it's pretty simple. You just turn the multifunction knob until you get to SPL or whatever button you want to assign to one of these buttons down here. And once the arrow's on it, you just press and hold one of these buttons and it'll assign it. Okay? Now, if you're a new ham, you might not realize it, but the FT-891 has 2 VFOs. It has VFO A and VFO B. So that's what this A and B here are. VFO A is currently tuned to 14.300. VFO B is currently tuned to 14.285. Now, what you're normally going to do is tune VFO A and keep tuning along until you get to your DX station. And like I said, let's say they're on 14.300. Now you can hear them transmitting. Now you're going to want to operate split. So you're going to be receiving on VFO A, and you're going to be transmitting on whatever frequencies on VFO B. Now, to get the radio to actually do that, you press split. Now you're going to be receiving on 14.300. You're going to be transmitting on 14.285. Now, let's say that's not the correct frequency. Let's say they said up 5. So you want to be listening on 14.300, but you're going to want to be transmitting on 14.305. Well, there's two ways to do it. One, if you press the A-B button up here, it'll swap VFO A and B like that. It swaps the frequencies. So what you could do is then tune this to 14.305. And then swap it back. Now see 14.305 is down here on VFO B, and VFO A is 14.300. There's also a quicker way of doing it. So let's say I'm at, I'm just picking a different frequency here for demonstration purposes. The quick way of doing it is when you enable split, you press and hold it in. And what that's going to do is it's going to put the rig into split mode, but it's going to take this frequency and it's going to add 5 kilohertz to it automatically. So watch. See, so we're originally on 14.310. When you press and hold it now down here on VFO B, it's 14.315. Now, the amount that it splits by is configurable. You could look at it in the menu and change that. I think you can go plus or minus 20 kilohertz. I'll show you that in a little bit. Okay, another function I want to mention that's kind of useful is this TXW. Okay, there it is. You can find it on function 2, on the function 2 shallow menu page. Here it is, TXW. Again, I assigned it to this button, button A, temporarily. So what that does for you is right now we're listening on 14.310 and we're transmitting on 14.315. Now you've picked some random frequency to transmit on. How do you know nobody else is transmitting there, or if there are a lot of people transmitting there? I mean, I'm pretty sure you're going to be stepping on somebody in the pileup, but you kind of want to be in a quieter chunk of the spectrum. So if you just want to listen to it temporarily, if you hold down the TXW button and watch VFO A, so it'll switch and receive on your transmit frequency while you're holding the button down. As soon as you release it, it'll go back. But the idea there is you pick a random frequency, and then you get all set up and ready to go. And maybe you call a couple times and they can't hear you, maybe because you're in the center of, a bunch of other hams that are calling, right? So you might want to tune away. How can you tell? Press and hold this button and listen to your transmit frequency. And if you hear a bunch of people calling, then you could just tune your VFO B to some other frequency. Okay, so that's a useful function there. Okay, now if you want to change the quick split frequency, meaning when you press and hold this button and it splits and it adds 5 kilohertz to your VFO B, if you want to change what that value is, maybe you want to use 10 or 3 or something like that, you go into the deep menu and look for menu item 0513, which is quick split frequency. So here you can change it to whatever you want, up to, I think, 20 kilohertz. So you could change it to plus or minus 20 kilohertz. I'm just going to put it back to the factory default at 5. But that's how you do that. Oh yeah, something else I forgot to mention. If your VFO B frequency is like really far away from your VFO A frequency and you want to match them, the quick way to do it is press and hold the A/B button. And that'll match both frequencies. It'll take whatever is in your VFO A and it'll copy it to B. Okay, now there's one other way to operate split, and it's kind of cheating because you're actually not putting the radio in split mode. What you could do is use the clarifier. You see the button CLAR over here that enables the clarifier. Now, what that normally does is it allows you to slightly tune, well, you normally use it to slightly tune your receive frequency. If somebody is slightly off frequency and you want to kind of clear that up so they don't sound weird, but you still want to transmit on the same frequency that you're on, you would enable the clarifier and you would tune it to make the other signal that's coming in sound better. Now, what you could do is you could switch the clarifier from receive mode to transmit mode. And if you do that, you can use it for your offset for when you're operating split. So to do that, you go into the deep menu and look for menu 518. And that's CLAR select. Okay, that's how you can change your clarifier from receive. Right now it's RX. You could change it to TX. Okay, now once you do that and you get out of the menu, if you press the clarifier, I've set it to 5,000 hertz, which is 5 kilohertz. So now, if the DX is listening 5 kilohertz up from the current frequency, now with the clarifier enabled and it's set to TX, watch when I key the mic. The frequency is going to jump to 14,305. So it's going to switch when you key the mic to that clarifying frequency, which is 5 kilohertz up from where it is. So that's what the plus 5,000 means. It's 5,000 hertz or 5 kilohertz is where it'll transmit. Now, if your clarifier says CLAR TX, that means you didn't set it correctly in the menu. It'll probably say RX here. So just make sure that's switched to TX and set this to some value that makes sense. So if they're saying up 5, you could make it 5 or something greater. The only problem is that this tops out at 10 kilohertz. So, you know, you could do 6, 7, 8, something like that, but you're not going to be able to get beyond 10 kilohertz using the clarifier. Okay, that's kind of like a quick and dirty way of splitting. You know, I don't know, take it or leave it. You know, if you ever want to do that, I kind of never do that. I just use the regular split mode. Okay, so that's pretty much it. But I just want to mention a tip here. If you hear a DX station calling CQ and they're not saying up, because sometimes they don't, you know, maybe they don't say it that often. So how do you actually tell if they're operating split? Well, the best thing to do is just sit there and listen. And if you don't hear anyone calling them, but they're working stations, then they're probably operating split. Okay, also, if you have a pan adapter or a spectrum display or waterfall or whatever, what you could do is you could look either up or down from the DX station's transmit frequency. After they call CQ, you'll see a big section of it light up, and that's probably that 10 or 15, you know, kilohertz wide chunk of the spectrum where everybody else is transmitting to try to get them. So if you do have a spectrum display, that is kind of a hack to figure out if they're operating split as well. But the best thing to do is just kind of listen. Just sit there and listen. Fuck this. Okay, folks. So there you have it. That's what operating split is all about. And now you know a few ways of doing it with the Yaesu FT-891. Now, if you have a different radio, then most modern radios have a split function and they kind of operate the same way. You probably don't enable it the same exact way, but it's probably similar. So check your manual. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, then please leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to you. So from the Shack of Joe, November 2, Delta India, I wish you all good health and good DX. 73. Bye-bye.